welcome to Life Stories. Imagine spending your entire life sacrificing everything for the person you love most, only to discover in the moment you should feel most proud that you are nothing more than a stranger in their world. What happens when the bond between a parent and child, something we all believe unbreakable, is tested not by tragedy, but by betrayal? Tonight, we step into a story where love collides with pride, where silence hides decades of pain, and where one choice shatters the illusion of family forever. It's raw, it's heartbreaking, and it will force you to question how far love should go before it becomes self-destruction. This isn't just about a wedding gone wrong. It's about the fragile line between devotion and dignity, and the cost of finding your voice when it's almost too late. And now, let's step into the story. Margaret never imagined that the moment she had dreamed about for years, watching her only son walk down the aisle, would end with her being told she wasn't welcome. The music had just begun to swell when Samantha, the bride-to-be, turned on her with venom in her eyes and a perfectly polished finger pointing like a dagger. "You've done enough. Leave." The words sliced through the air like glass shattering on marble. The room went silent. Dozens of heads turned toward Margaret, the woman who had paid for every detail of the day. The shimmering venue in Malibu, the roses flown in from Colombia, the orchestra tuning their instruments in the corner. She clutched her purse, her hand brushing against the envelope inside. A $50,000 check meant to cover the final costs. Her son, Ethan, stood frozen, eyes fixed on the floorboards, unable to meet her gaze. No defense, no hesitation, just silence. Her throat tightened, but Margaret refused to give Samantha the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She walked past the rows of guests who pretended not to stare, her heels echoing against the polished stone. Outside, the night air was thick with salt and jasmine, but all Margaret could hear was the bride's hiss replaying in her mind. "You're not welcome here." She sat in her car, the engine cold beneath her trembling hands, her reflection caught in the rearview mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back at her, pale, hollow-eyed, a mother erased from her son's story. But beneath the shame and grief, something else began to stir, a heat that hardened into steel. For 30 years, she had written checks, swallowed insults, and bent herself into silence to keep peace in a fractured family. Tonight, something broke. They thought she was weak, a convenient bank account with no voice. But the truth was more dangerous than they knew. Every contract, every invoice, every signature belonged to her. Without Margaret, there was no wedding. She scrolled through her phone and found the email thread with the wedding planner. Her thumb hovered for a moment before pressing call. The woman's chipper greeting almost made her laugh. "I'm canceling everything," Margaret said flatly, her voice steadier than her heart. "The venue, the flowers, the catering. If I'm not welcome, neither is my money." The planner stuttered, tried to remind her about deposits and penalties, but Margaret cut her off with ice in her tone. "I'm the client, my name, my money, end it." By the time she pulled into her driveway in Santa Barbara, the anger had crystallized into clarity. She opened her wedding binder, tabs meticulously labeled: venue, florist, catering, photography, entertainment. Every page was a reminder of her generosity, of how she had carried this fantasy on her back, while her son and his fiancée contributed nothing but demands. One by one, she called each vendor, her voice growing stronger with every confirmation. The cancellations became a rhythm, a mantra. This wasn't their wedding. It had always been hers. The first knock on her door came just past midnight. Ethan's car was in the driveway, headlights still burning. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." She stayed seated, staring at the glowing cursor on her laptop. "Mom, you can't do this. It's our wedding." His voice cracked with anger. Margaret whispered to herself, lips curling into a cold smile. "No, Ethan, it never was." The next morning, the storm truly began. Her phone buzzed endlessly, texts from relatives urging her to be the bigger person, calls from her ex-husband David telling her to stop overreacting. Online, Samantha went public with crocodile tears, posting a video framed in perfect lighting, mascara streaking artfully down her cheeks. "I never thought my future mother-in-law would destroy our wedding out of spite. Please pray for us." Thousands of strangers rushed to comfort her, vilifying Margaret as toxic, jealous, cruel. Margaret watched in silence, fury humming low in her chest. The comments called her a monster, but she knew the truth. The villain was the woman weaponizing her generosity. Then came the email that made Margaret's blood run cold. A honeymoon package in Maui, billed to her credit card, booked weeks before she had even been invited to choose the flowers. A $26,000 trip, along with designer luggage and luxury spa deposits, all without her knowledge. As she scrolled through the charges, a realization hit like a gunshot. This was never a wedding. It was a heist. A calculated extraction of her money, her dignity, her role as a mother. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan's voicemail. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. You've never been a real mother. Controlling, selfish. No wonder Dad left you. You've ruined the only good thing in my life. The words should have shattered her, but instead she felt something inside her snap free. The last fragile thread tying her to the boy she once loved more than life itself was gone. Margaret sat in the stillness of her kitchen, her reflection pale in the glass of the window, and for the first time in decades, she didn't cry. She laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh that startled even her. She wasn't weak. She wasn't their wallet. She was the storm they never saw coming. Would you still fight for a child who chose betrayal over love? How many sacrifices must a mother make before she finally says enough? Because as Margaret poured her cold tea into the sink, she knew one truth with terrifying clarity. Tomorrow, their perfect Malibu wedding would collapse, and it would be Margaret herself who pulled the first stone from the foundation. The pounding on Margaret's front door started just after dawn, the sound sharp and insistent against the quiet hum of the ocean outside her Santa Barbara home. She had barely slept, her mind replaying Ethan's voicemail in jagged loops. No wonder Dad left you, always too controlling, always the victim. She had spent half the night clutching a mug of cold tea, trying to decide whether the ache in her chest was grief or liberation. Now Ethan's voice carried through the door, hoarse with desperation. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." She hesitated, the weight of decades pressing on her shoulders. When she finally cracked the door, Ethan pushed inside without waiting. His face was drawn, his suit from the rehearsal wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed like a boy who had been crying but refused to admit it. "You've destroyed everything," he spat. "Do you even care what you've done? Do you care about me? About Samantha? About our future?" Margaret stood tall in her robe, her voice low and steady. "Lower your voice. You're in my house." Ethan paced like a cornered animal. "The vendors are gone. The venue says they've been rebooked. The florist won't even answer our calls. Do you understand what you've done?" She folded her arms, every word deliberate. "I stopped funding my own humiliation." His eyes widened, stunned. "Humiliation? Mom!" She was upset. She didn't mean what she said. Margaret's laugh was sharp, bitter. She meant every word. "She told me to leave, Ethan, and you stood there in silence. My own son." His expression hardened, the boy she had raised disappearing behind a stranger's mask. "You've always been like this," he said coldly. "Selfish, controlling. This is why Dad left." The words cut deep, reopening wounds she thought had scarred long ago. For a heartbeat, she faltered. But then, instead of collapsing, she straightened. "Selfish?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "I gave up everything for you. Every dream, every dollar, every piece of myself, so you could stand here today, and you repay me by siding with her." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he had no words. Margaret walked to the door and held it open. "You've made your choice. You chose Samantha over me. Then let her pay for the life she wants." He lingered for a moment, torn between anger and shame, before storming past her, the door slamming so hard the walls rattled. She stood in the silence that followed, her hands shaking not from fear, but from release. For the first time, she recognized the truth. The boy she loved more than life itself was gone. In his place stood a man she didn't recognize, and maybe never would. The phone calls began within the hour. Her sister-in-law, Karen, speaking in a tone too sweet to be sincere, urged her to be the bigger person. Then David's voice, her ex-husband, sharp and impatient. "Margaret, this is too much. Reinstate the payments. Don't make this about old wounds. Each word scraped like sandpaper across her heart. They wanted her to keep quiet, keep paying, keep sacrificing. Be the bigger person. It was code for erasing herself again. She hung up, her chest tight, but her resolve unshaken. Then came the twist she hadn't expected. Margaret's lawyer, Angela Torres, sat across from her in the bright Los Angeles office, papers neatly stacked. "You've done nothing wrong," Angela said firmly. "Every contract is in your name. If they want a wedding, they'll have to pay for it themselves." Margaret exhaled, relief mingled with something sharper, power. But then Angela slid another folder across the desk. "Did you know Ethan has been withdrawing money from the account you set up for him years ago?" Margaret's stomach dropped. She hadn't checked that account in ages, believing it was dormant. Angela tapped a line on the printout, a $7,500 withdrawal the same week Margaret paid the venue deposit. "He's been pulling funds behind your back," Angela said gently. "We should freeze it before it's drained." Margaret stared at the paper, the betrayal spreading like fire through her chest. That account had been her last thread of unconditional trust, her silent promise that no matter what happened, she would always be there for her son. Now even that was gone. For a long moment, her hands hovered over the folder, torn between heartbreak and clarity. Then she whispered, "Do it." Angela nodded, already issuing instructions. Margaret's hands no longer trembled. She felt stripped bare but stronger for it. That evening, her phone buzzed again. Ethan. Against her better judgment, she pressed play on his voicemail. His tone was colder this time, rehearsed cruelty dripping from every word. "You've never been a real mother. Samantha was right. You've always been jealous of her. No wonder Dad left you. You've ruined everything. You're bitter, you're alone, and that's all you'll ever be." The line clicked dead. Margaret sat in silence, staring at the phone. Once those words would have destroyed her, but now they rang hollow. If Ethan thought he could break her, he was wrong. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one rewriting the story. Do you think Margaret should forgive Ethan, or is this betrayal beyond repair? Because as Margaret left Angela's office with the cease and desist letter in hand, she knew the real battle was only beginning, and the world was about to discover who truly held the power. The wedding day dawned bright and golden, the kind of California morning that seemed stolen from a postcard. Margaret woke in a spa suite overlooking the Santa Barbara coast, sunlight spilling across her bed. For a moment she lay still, listening to the muffled hush of waves below, and realized she felt lighter than she had in years. Today was supposed to have been the culmination of everything she had sacrificed for her son, the day she was meant to sit proudly in the front row. Instead, she was hundreds of miles away, the contract shredded, the payments erased, the fantasy dismantled piece by piece. And strangely, there was no grief in her chest, only a fragile peace. At noon, she sat on her balcony, her hair wrapped in a towel, a glass of champagne sweating in her hand. She scrolled through her phone and saw the storm unfolding. Samantha had gone public again, posting a tear-stained video about betrayal and cruelty. Strangers rushed to console her, calling Margaret jealous, toxic, broken. But then the tide shifted. Screenshots leaked. Receipts of the honeymoon in Maui charged to Margaret's card, whispers from vendors confirming that Margaret had paid every dime, that Samantha and Ethan had contributed nothing. The comments turned sharp, almost vicious. They used her. Who throws out the person funding the wedding? The carefully constructed image of Samantha as the victim cracked under the weight of truth, and Margaret didn't have to lift a finger. By evening, Ethan's college friends had joined the chorus, recalling stories of his weakness, his habit of letting others speak for him. The glossy fairy tale had curdled into gossip, a public cautionary tale. Margaret read the words in silence, her champagne untouched, and realized the strangest part. She no longer cared if strangers loved or hated her. For the first time in decades, the world's opinion was irrelevant. She had chosen herself. Then, just as the sun dipped into the Pacific, her phone lit up again. Ethan. Against every instinct, she answered. His voice was frayed, stripped of anger, carrying only exhaustion. "Mom, I don't know what to say anymore. Everything's ruined. Samantha won't stop crying. Guests are canceling. We have nothing left." For a moment, Silence stretched between them, heavy with all the years that had led here. Margaret closed her eyes, imagining the boy he once was, the child who had once reached for her hand in crowded rooms, who had once whispered, "I love you," without shame. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who had chosen betrayal. "Ethan," she said quietly, "you chose this. You chose her words over my dignity. You let me stand alone." His breath caught, and she thought he might finally apologize. Instead, he said, "I just wanted you to be proud of me." The words tore at her heart. She swallowed the ache and replied, "I was proud of you until you forgot who I was." And then she ended the call. That night, she dreamed of her own wedding decades ago, the lace dress heavy on her shoulders, her mother-in-law's voice in her ear. Quiet women make the best wives. Don't make waves. She woke with tears on her cheeks, but a new clarity burning in her chest. Quiet was not weakness. Silence was not surrender. She had lived half a life bending to others, and now, in the wreckage, she had found her voice. Weeks later, the scandal had burned through every corner of their town. Samantha's Instagram went silent. Ethan disappeared from social gatherings, and the whispers only grew louder. A spoiled couple who destroyed their own wedding by biting the hand that fed them. Margaret did not gloat. She did not post. She simply lived. She took morning walks by the beach, booked a pottery class she had always put off, and even laughed over dinner with friends she hadn't seen in years. The hollow in her chest still ached, but it no longer consumed her. One evening, she sat on her balcony again, watching the horizon melt into gold. A new text appeared on her phone. No apology, no explanation, just 4 words from Ethan. "Can we start over?" She stared at the message for a long time. Her hands trembled, torn between the longing of a mother and the resolve of a woman who had finally learned her worth. Slowly, she typed nothing, set the phone face down, and let the silence answer for her. The waves crashed below, steady and eternal. Margaret lifted her glass, the sea breeze cool against her skin. For years, she had been their foundation, their safety net, their silent benefactor. But now she was something else. Free, whole, untouchable. And as the night deepened, she whispered to herself words no one else would ever hear. "Happiness looks better on me." How did this story make you feel about love, sacrifice, and self-respect? If you enjoyed this story, comment 100 below. Which country are you watching from? Share this video with your friends, and thank you for being part of Life Stories.